Welcome to NFCC's Guide Through the Seasons of Mental Wellness. I'm your host, Anna Crane, a licensed social worker and outreach counselor at Nick Finnegan Counseling Center here in Houston, Texas. You are not alone. Saying this to someone who is struggling may be the most comforting thing that you could say to them. There are 8 billion people on this earth. Of course we're not alone, but there are times in life when it certainly feels like we are. Times when it may be difficult to talk about what you're going through. In this season of the Seasons of Mental Wellness, we get vulnerable and talk about how to overcome struggles that are more common than you may think, with someone who's been through it. I'm your host, Anna Crane. Now let's get into today's episode. Welcome, Erica. Let's get started by telling our listeners all about you. I have the pleasure of knowing you and loving you and being a part of your journey, but I just wanted you to kind of tell us a little about you and your journey and what makes you have this unconventional path, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Anna. I'm really excited to be part of your podcast. So a little bit about myself. My parents are both Mexican. They migrated to the United States when they were really young, in their teens. They met in Florida. They were both working for agriculture, so like a lot of farming, picking strawberries and all the things. When they asked that, they started talking, they met, and then they were kind of traveling around the different states to do different agriculture work. Well, fast forward, my mom got pregnant and I am her firstborn. I was born in Georgia, and I actually was part of that journey up until I was 12 years old. They were traveling to different states. I was considered a migrant student. I didn't learn the English language until I was about 7, 8 years old. I remember being in my first grade class, not understanding a thing. So that was really challenging, but it allowed me to connect with people in a different way. I remember being in my first grade class and the girls would come and touch my hair and they would kind of play with my hair. And I really never understood that until I got older. I was like, oh, they were African American and our texture of our hair is different. So now, like older, I was like, we were communicating, but in a different way because I wasn't able to talk to them. So that's what I did as a kid. We lived in Brownsville, South Texas, up until I was 15 years old. And then we moved to Florida. While I was in Florida, my parents were actually kind of going through a lot in their marriage, and they felt like if they moved to a different state, that was going to help them. Well, that came with a lot of challenges for me, and I ended up moving out of my house when I was 17 years old. That's when I met my now husband. We actually been together for 19 years. So,
Which she's super young, y'all. So that is a long time.
that is super long. Yeah. Like I was really young, and I'm just really grateful that we're still together and that he was the perfect one for me then and now. So Ezekiel and I moved in together, and about a year later, I was pregnant. I found out I was pregnant. I was really young. It was really scary. In our Hispanic culture, like we take pride in having babies. It's like part of it. Like if you can do this, you could have a baby. So like it's not uncommon for Hispanic women to have babies at a young age.
Right. So, like that's actually not that unconventional.
Yeah, totally. So I found out I was pregnant. Everything was well, really excited about our baby. I kind of go into a normal visit and the doctor's like, hey, I think you're ready. We're going to, check you in the hospital and we're going to see if you're dilated. Everything was going well until I was probably about 4 centimeters dilated, and they're like, the baby's heart rate's dropping. They take me into an emergency C-section, and when he is out, he's lost a lot of oxygen. He's basically blue. The cord was wrapped around his neck. So it was a very traumatic delivery. They're taking care of him, and because I was like completely asleep sedated because of the emergency C-section, I'm kind of waking up like, what's going on?
Yeah.
The nurse approached me and she's like, hey, your son's retarded. And I remember just kind of like thinking, am I dreaming? Like, what is she talking about? Like, you know, the word retarded was not common, but still people used it back in the day. Ezekiel was born in 2007. So it was like, why is she saying that? And then they transport him to an all children's hospital in St. Petersburg, and they do some genetic testing. And that's when we find out that Ezekiel has Down syndrome.
Did you get to go with him?
I didn't, because he was like flown to St. Petersburg through a helicopter, and I had to stay back. So I didn't get to hold my baby until the hospital thought it was safe for me to get released.
Do you
So
remember how long that was?
it felt like forever, but
Sure.
thinking through, it was about 4 days.
Okay.
It's a 2-hour drive from where we're at, driving, and with a very
With the C-section. Yeah.
it's going to be super painful. You're going to feel every bump. So they did the skin glue, and we're like, hopefully you make it through.
Yeah, like, good luck, honey.
Yeah.
And you were 18, right? 19 or 18.
Yes. So we get to the hospital, and I remember when I saw Ezekiel Jr., immediately I saw that he looked different. And it was really emotional, but the nurse that I had was so helpful. And she was like, hey, kids with Down syndrome get to live very long lives, and he's going to be so loving, and you're going to love him. And I remember at that age, the only thing I was worried about was like, they're going to make fun of him in school, and kind of thinking through that now, I'm like, I was so young, just like,
Yeah, you were inexperienced in life. So how could you imagine what his experiences would be?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a really scary time. However, I had a really good support system with the Ronald McDonald's House. They provided free shelter because I was 2 hours away from home.
Right.
And young, especially that. So I stayed there. They had access to computers. And I remember just Googling Down syndrome, like, what does that mean? I was so naive that I thought maybe it was something I had ate. Like, I was like,
Yeah.
something wrong. Like, I remember like trying my best to eat like healthy. So it was just,
Yeah, it's like such a natural thing. I feel like, especially for women and for moms, to immediately think like, what did I do wrong? Like, how did I make this happen? Even though there's nothing that you did.
that's right. Yeah. And I remember the doctor explaining, like, hey, this is what happens. This happened, when the egg and the sperm met. Like, this had nothing to do with what you ate. And I was like, but, it was just
like, what about that hot dog? Yeah, or whatever.
yes. But it's Ezekiel is 16 years old now. He's going to be 17 soon. And he is so healthy, He's healthy in the way that he doesn't have to have any medical equipment. However, he is severely delayed. So we have to do a lot of things for him. He still wears a diaper. We have to feed him, but he's healthy. So while it's been challenging, we've been really fortunate to have ended in a place like Tyler, Texas, where there is a school specifically designed for students with special needs. And Boshears has been a blessing to us and him, in the sense of just giving him that care and the therapies, and just it's been an awesome experience with him.
I think it's really interesting because this is like such a testament to who you are and the mom that you are and the woman that you are. You just talked so much about your son and how amazing he is, and your husband and how amazing he is. But I feel like there's so many hurdles that you have jumped over, and I would say like leaped over eloquently in a way that so many people I don't think people can appreciate it if they don't understand, because they haven't gone through it, right? So like, I would love to hear you talk about yourself a little bit and like your journey after becoming his mom, and just like what you did to make sure that you would have this successful, beautiful family, because I think that's something that like I want people to hear about from you. I want them to hear about your strength and your story about how like
you have gone through a lot and you have just like continued to jump over those hurdles in a beautiful way. So can you talk a little bit about like your story after having him?
Yeah, totally. So fast forward to I was like about 29 years old, I decided that I wanted to go back to college. And I knew that that was going to be a long shot because, being a special needs mom and still having to be a provider. But I went ahead and did it anyways. At that time, I had a mentor at my old job where she was like, "Hey, I went back to school when I was 30. Like, go for it, do it." So I went back to school, received my master's at 34 years old
And what, Erica?
in social work. So I
Oh,
am a licensed mastered social worker. I am currently working for my LCSW. So I'm under supervision halfway through. Hopefully, we'll obtain that this year. But yeah, it's been something that I'm really proud of just to have been able to kind of go through that journey, considering all the challenges that, I kind of had to face through this process.
yeah.
So yeah, it's been real, but I know that it's doable. So because here I am, and I am a first generation graduate. My parents only had an elementary level education. So I'm really proud that I have paved the way for generations to, Hispanic women tend to be only about a 2% hold a master's degree, and I'm part of that. So that makes me really, really proud.
Absolutely. You should be proud. I feel like there's so many spaces where you could feel like you didn't deserve it or you shouldn't do it or this is against my culture, against what I'm doing, what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm seeing you nod your head through that. So like, did you feel alone being an older student? Did you feel alone being a younger mom? Did you feel alone being a mom of a child with special needs? I mean, how did that all impact your mental health?
Absolutely. For me, it was conflicting because my culture says, hey, you are a mom and you will devote your entire time and day. The fact that I was a working mom already was kind of is something that's not very common in our culture, especially like my mom's generation culture,
Right.
So already doing that was very, not the traditional way to do things. So it was hard and I had a lot of mom guilt because I had to
Yes.
leave my kids with dad and he was the one handling all the things while I was, kind of reading and trying to complete a 50-page paper,
Yes. You had two
Uh,
other kids. Like we didn't even talk about you had two other kids in the
yes,
mix of this
yes,
too.
yeah. I
After
do
Ezekiel,
have
you have two other beautiful children.
yes, yes. And they came a little bit later. I feel like I was already like more prepared, I guess is the word, when they came along. But yes, I do have three kids, 16, 13, and 8.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it was difficult to do this as an untraditional student, like being a special needs mom, being Hispanic. With that, there were some challenges there, but I was really lucky to have a lot of support. For me, it was like I knew that the journey was going to be hard, but I had a lot of like belief in myself. I was like, girl,
Yeah,
you this, you've done this, you've done that, you can do this.
absolutely. How do you feel like your community that you had, you mentioned like you've mentioned a couple times you have had a lot of support. How do you feel like your community like rallied around you? How do you feel like they supported you?
Yeah, I think for the most part, just like my family, my husband, like for him, that was, hey, you want to go back to school? Like, I will support you through that. I mean, there were some times where he was like, I'm done. Like, but for the most part, he was very supportive and that's very untraditional for him too. He
Yeah.
doesn't have an education. So him just kind of listening to me talk about like I have to write this and this is what this is saying. He was just kind of like, okay. And with my mom, she was there all the way, really very supportive with helping with my kids and just her dream was for me to have an education when she moved to the US and had me here. That was her goal. And she's just super happy that I have modeled that because my sister actually just graduated with her registered nurse degree. So, like, I feel like that's kind of paved the way for them as well, So it's been difficult, but I mean, Anna, you've been a support system for me, and honestly, just a cheerleader. I think that that's really been really over like encouraging just to have people who believe in you and who cheer for you. And I've just been really lucky to be surrounded by people that are just cheering for me and supporting me in so many ways.
I mean, knowing you is a blessing. Watching you, I feel like is something that is amazing because you never stop to think like this is too hard. Even if you feel that, I feel like well, okay, I take that back. You do stop and say like, this is really hard for me, but you're so solutions focused in a way that I think is amazing. And I do think it's because you have faced some challenges that have said like, oh, okay, well, the door is not open for me. How can I pry it open? And I think that that is something that is beautiful, and people like you deserve support. And I think not always does our community at large, right? Like the world, look at people that take the unconventional path and think, you know what, actually that person's a badass. I think sometimes we look at that and we think like, uh-oh, that's an other, that's not good, right?
Yeah.
So do you feel like along your way, along your path, people looked at you and said like, well, she can't do it because she has this child with special needs, or she can't do it because she was a young mom, or she can't do it because she's Hispanic or a woman or whatever. And how do you feel like you responded to that if that was the case?
Yeah, no, I think for me, it was a lot like just believing in myself, just saying, this is what I've heard, not only as an adult, but as a child, like meeting new teachers and new people every single school year because I was moving so often to different states and different districts. And every time I would encounter a new school, they were like, actually, what you were learning, we already learned. So now we're going to be on something completely different. So I think that resiliency came from when I was really young and I really didn't know why. I was like, why am I so resilient? Like, where is this coming from? And I think it's just been the ability to adapt, and then just having, although encountering people who don't believe in me, but having such a strong support system that's like, hey, you can do it. Like,
Yeah.
forget what people are saying, forget what people would think, you can do this. So I think honestly, part of it has just been, through resiliency and having such a strong support circle of people.
Yeah, I hear you say that. And I think about like knowing you and knowing how you are, you do represent so much grit and resilience. And I think with that being said, I don't think that someone who met you would know that you have ever experienced any challenges because of the way that you carry yourself.
Yes, like last Friday. So part of my job, I work for youth mental health services, and part of my job is to meet with administrators and talk about like what we're doing. So I was meeting with someone, and he's like, the population that we serve here in this district, they've faced a lot of challenges. He's like, some things you've never experienced. I'm sure you've always had a trusted adult in your life. And I was like, oh, like, I'm like, he's assuming that I've had a really good life.
Yeah.
And I was really shocked by that. And I remember coming back to my boss and saying, he just assumed maybe because in my role, at my job, or because of the services we provide, that I've never experienced hard things.
Right. Like
And
you're the director of mental health for a nonprofit, and that's very well known in your community. You have a master's degree. You're so, visually, quote unquote, put together. You're this beautiful person. You have this loving family, but like you worked your ass off for that.
absolutely. And in that moment, I wanted to say, actually, but I was like, I'm just going to hear him out. And I had another person there with me who is like kind of leads that region. And she was like, when he was talking about these students living with their grandparents and like their parents being alcoholics, she made sure to stop him and say, hey, actually, Erica, shares a very similar background than the students who go to this district. And
Yeah.
I kind of looked and I was like, that's so interesting. Like you just shared the assumption that because someone on the outside looks like oh, they may be okay because they hold this position or they have this degree. But in reality, there's just so much more than that.
There's so much more than that. And I think that it's people like you who are willing to tell your story and share and be vulnerable and honest about what it takes to get to where you are and how nothing was handed to you. You worked really hard for it. And getting a degree at 34, there's zero shame in the game of that. And being really proud of yourself instead of being like, oh, it took me, this long or whatever.
Yeah.
You are proud of yourself, which you should be. And you are paving a way and it doesn't have to be that traditional route,
Right. Yeah. And, for me, it's like just changing generational paths. I talk to my kids about like, well, what are you going to do when you go to college? Like, my mom just wanted me to graduate high school. That was going to be the win.
Yeah.
Wasn't thinking about college. She didn't know anything about FAFSA. I had to figure out all of that stuff on my own, which was really intimidating because I was like, I've never filled out an application. I don't even know what to put on here. So just kind of had to learn the ropes on my own. And then when my sister was like, hey, I want to go back to college as a non-traditional student too, I was like, hey, I got you on the FAFSA. I'm going to help you apply for a scholarship. And then my younger sister started college. So like, I feel like it's really, changing those generational paths for our generations. And I'm just really excited to see when my kids go to college and their kids go to college. So I really feel like, we've paved the way for that. Hopefully.
You have, and you should be so proud of it. I feel like there's a piece of this that I want to make sure to touch on, which is when you are feeling like I can't do it, or when Ezekiel was like, that's too much, this is too much, I don't want to do this anymore. What did you yourself do to manage your mental health in those moments to say like, no, this is really important?
I think trusting the process and believing in myself.
Yeah.
Because, there was times where I wanted to quit. Like, it was a lot. Like, I remember waking up on my desk because I was writing a paper at 3 a.m, 4 a.m. And it wasn't necessarily because I was leaving it for like last minute. It was because I had an 8-hour shift. And at the time I worked for a crisis center. So like they required a lot of me at that time. So for me, it was just kind of realizing, okay, I need to trust the process. We're going to get to the end of this road and there's going to be, a degree waiting for me. So for my mental health, I had to do a lot of like self-awareness, like taking a break and I needed to, seeking healthy behaviors, especially I went through college during COVID. It was so easy to just pick up a glass of wine because I was in every meeting for school. So it was just like identifying those healthy coping skills. Taking a break was something that was helpful. Meeting, just spending time with my kids, chatting with my friends. So really just identifying and having that self-awareness of when to take a break.
Yeah, I would say that's something that you were so good at. I feel like you are such a joyful human that you were really good about finding things that were going to give you joy, even if it was like in the middle of the day, going on a Target run, even if you didn't buy anything, walking around, taking a break, And I feel like you were such an example of, I know I have to take care of myself so I can take care of my people. And I was so proud of you for that piece of watching you flourish. And I think you're such a great example of like, you're not alone if you're doing these things in a non-traditional order. For those of us who are supporting someone who is on a non-traditional path, what are some things that people either did for you that supported you, or what are tips you would give for those people who are supporting someone who's on this non-traditional path, or, just in an unconventional story?
Yeah. I think honestly, Anna, like giving those people grace, like, and I think part of it is, especially as a non-traditional, like, unfortunately, you're gonna be away from your kids. You're gonna not be fully present because you do have to give some time to school, And I think that it's challenging to see that, especially in our culture, like seeing like mom not really being there for their kids in this time because dad's having to hold it down, like just
Yeah.
giving them grace and also support, like, hey, I'll go and wash the dishes for you if you need me. Just showing up for them and believing in them too, just like that kind of reassurance, like, hey, this is hard now, but you will get through this. Like there is the light at the end of the tunnel. Things will get easier. And once you get there, it's so rewarding, not only for you, but also for those people who supported you through that process. Like when I graduated, my mom's like, I feel like I graduated too. And my husband was like, and I got a degree too, because, we did this together.
Yeah.
But definitely just showing up for people and believing in them and just, giving grace that it's okay for them to kind of like do the things that they're expected to do in a different way.
Yeah. Like I support you doing what you need to do no matter what so that you can accomplish the goals and dreams that you have.
Right. Yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay, we're going to do our rapid fire 5. Are you ready?
Let's do this.
All right. So to you, community is
a person, place, or thing that gives you a sense of belonging.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, belonging. It's so important. And I feel like it's so important, especially if you're on the non-traditional path. Okay. If you could read one book or listen to one podcast or watch one movie on repeat, what would it be?
Okay, so I actually read it with me so I can show you. So the book is called The Gift of Influence by Tommy Spalding. This book, y'all. It was gifted to me by my leadership, Tyler, like the executive director. And it's really shown me like the role we play in people's lives. And it talks about like just the power of influence, kindness. Like it's more than just an action. It goes so far. So I could read this every day, all day. I think it's so, it just allows me to reflect on like just being kind. Being kind is just spreads everywhere.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to go buy it today.
Please do.
Okay. The best version of self-care for you personally is?
Having that self-awareness. So knowing what I need in the moment. So if I need a break, if I need a pee break, if I need to drink some water. So just having that self-awareness of what my body needs in the moment.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I thought you were going to say shopping.
That's what I would have said a year ago.
I think that's so mine. Okay. What's one thing you are proud of?
Oh, I think just modeling for my siblings and again, like paving the way for them. I'm so proud of them for going back to college. And then just, I think that modeling, people hear that phrase and they're like, yeah, you need to model this for your siblings. And as a non-traditional, as a 30-year-old, to be model and know that that has had such an effect on them. I'm super proud of that.
Yes, you have like broken generational trauma. I mean, you alone. Like I've watched you. You're amazing. Okay. What is one thing you are deeply grateful for?
My family. I think honestly, like, although with my son Ezekiel, there's been so many challenges and scary moments, he's made me the person I am today. And then with Joel and Eliana, I think that they've also brought a lot to me. They've created who I am. And then my husband and my mom and, my siblings, they have all really have contributed to everything that I've done up to now.
Oh, I love it. Well, Erica, I have just loved talking to you. I love the idea of people knowing who you are and knowing your story and knowing that if you can do it, I can do it kind of a thing. And I always tell you this, but I'm so overly impressed by you because I have had the opportunity to not only watch you and see you grow into the person that you are, but also just like experience your joy and love. And I feel blessed by you. So knowing you has been an absolute honor. And so I'm so glad that these people get to experience you too. If people would like to reach out to you, where do you work? And tell us a little bit about that place so that they could potentially talk to you if they wanted to.
Absolutely. So I work at Next Step Community Solutions. It is a nonprofit organization that provides school-based mental health and behavioral health services. I actually have Anna's old role. So Anna did this before me. She actually was somebody I looked up to, especially in this role. So I had some big shoes to fill. But you could reach me at my email. My work email is erica.guzman@nextstepcsi.com. And yeah, so I've been here in this role for about 2 years now since you left.
You're killing it. Well, I'm so excited that people can get in touch with you if they would like to. And I'm just so thankful for you today. And I'm so glad they get to hear your little voice.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
Yay!
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us reach more listeners, please share it with someone you know, post about it on social media, and leave a rating or a review. To see what's coming next, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at NickFinnCounsel or visit our website at finnegancounseling.org. Before I go, I'd also like to thank the people who made this project possible. My wonderful friends and guest experts who joined me each episode, our production team at 3 Wire Creative, our editor, Giselle Dixon, and the amazing leadership team and supporters at Nick Finnegan Counseling Center in Houston, Texas. Until next time.